Hello YouTube friends, Ben Ochart here. Thank you so much for tuning in. As you know, I just added a large number of fish to this tank here, and I have some more that are coming in that will, after quarantine, will also be added to this tank. So I wanted to talk with you a little bit about adding fish and some of the common mistakes that can be made when adding new fish to an aquarium, and some of those mistakes can be deadly and result in fish dying shortly after you've added them. So let's go ahead and talk about that now. If this is your first time to the channel and you haven't subscribed, be sure to hit that subscription icon and the bell for notifications, and let's push the channel up over 40,000. What do you say? That's a milestone I've been looking forward to for quite some time. All right, thank you in advance for doing that. So here are the five mistakes that I think are that are unfortunately too common when adding fish to a new tank that can result in a disaster and ultimately the death of the fish. Number one, a tank that isn't ready for fish. And this is probably the one mistake that kills more fish keepers, especially brand new ones. They add fish, the tank hasn't really cycled. And by cycled, what I mean, for those of you who are new, the tank doesn't really have a colony of beneficial bacteria that can consume the ammonia that the fish are producing into nitrite, and then have the bacteria to consume the nitrite into nitrate. This tank is running at 0 ammonia, 0 nitrite, which is what you want, and about 10 parts per million of nitrate. What that means is I have a very thriving colony of beneficial bacteria that is handling the enormous amount of waste that is being produced by these fish and by the volume of food that I have to give these fish. So a tank that isn't ready for fish, it's not ready. You haven't allowed it to, as Corey at the Aquarium Co-op says, you haven't allowed it to season. You add the fish and the fish look okay, maybe for a day or two, and they start to show signs of stress, and then they die, reacting to the spike in ammonia. They can't tolerate ammonia really at all, and they can tolerate a little bit more than the nitrite, and they can certainly tolerate a lot of nitrate, but ammonia, it's almost an instant death sentence. So a tank that's not ready, that's number one. Number two, one of the second biggest mistake I think people make when adding new fish is that they haven't quarantined the fish. And by this, what I mean is they haven't allowed the fish to live in a tank where they can observe the fish for at least about 4 weeks to make sure that the fish isn't bringing a parasite, ick, or something like that that will then contaminate all the other fish. So mistake number two, not putting that fish in quarantine, and if needed, treating that fish with medication in quarantine and being absolutely sure that that fish is healthy before you add the fish to the main population, to your show tank. That's number two. Number three is you didn't acclimate the fish correctly. And by that, what I mean is the way that you matched the temperature and ultimately moved the fish from however it was transported to your home to the tank was done in a way that created some stress. And when people ship fish to me, a lot of the fish I have, almost all of them really, were shipped to me. So they were in a bag for a very long period of time, by not super long, maybe 5 hours to as much as a day, but a lot of ammonia is built up in that bag. If you then take that fish and do something like let's say a trickle or a drip of aquarium water into the bag and things of this nature, you will have a spike in the ammonia. You'll actually have a bad reaction. You open the bag, you mix the oxygen, you trickle in a little bit of the water, and this actually stresses the fish. This is why what I do is called flop and drop. I take the bag, I float it for 15 minutes, roughly about 15 minutes, the temperatures match. I then very quickly cut open the bag and pour the fish through a net so the water goes into a bucket, and I have the fish netted and I drop them in the tank. Or I simply reach into the bag, grab the fish and put them into the tank. I don't spend a lot of time trickling water in there because that can create some bad outcomes. Another mistake that can be made in adding, and this is number 4, another mistake that can be made in adding fish is too much too fast. And even though this tank here is, I added a tremendous amount of beneficial bacteria. I transferred filter media from the established tanks and put it into the sump. Tremendous amount of beneficial bacteria. However, if I was to add, let's say 20 fish right now to this tank, I would outrun the beneficial bacteria. And by that what I mean is I would produce more waste than the beneficial bacteria can handle. The bacteria would catch up eventually, but in the meantime, I would have an ammonia spike that would kill off the less hardy of the fish. So you add 10 new fish, 12 fish, 20 fish, you lose 5 or 6 of them. I've gone through this personally. The less hardy of the batch who can't tolerate the ammonia will actually die off while the beneficial bacteria is catching up, and then things will go over to normal and you'll be scratching your head and wondering what happened. You outran your beneficial bacteria, the ability of the beneficial bacteria to convert the amount of ammonia you're producing into nitrite and ultimately nitrate. One way to go around that, of course, would be to treat the tank every day. You could treat it every day and maybe after a few days do a nice water change, and a good sized water change, and then treat it some more. You can also add products like a Fritzyme 7 product, something like this, which will give you a big beneficial bacteria boost. And so there are some ways of adding a large number of fish, but realize that if you outrun your beneficial bacteria, you're going to have a die-off. There's just no way around it. Number 5 on my list of 5 here is a failure to observe. And by that what I mean is, after adding fish, in particular with African cichlids, you need to spend some time observing the tank. Watch for signs of stress. Is a fish gasping? Is the fish clamping their fins and not swimming right? Is the fish being ganged up on relentlessly by other fish? If some of those things are going on, you need to take action. But if you add the fish and then turn the lights off and then disappear for the day, you're not going to discover these things until 6, 8, 10 hours later, and you might have a fish that has been beaten to a point of no return, or a fish that is just not going to make it now, whereas you could have pulled that fish out right away and put him into a less stressful environment like a hospital tank and saved the fish. So observation is point number 5. Now, I conducted a survey at the community page of YouTube, and you can see the results here. And as you can see, the majority of the responses leaned in the direction of a cycled tank. And I have to agree with them. I have to agree with those that answered. I thank those of you who participated in the survey, and I do think that that is the number one reason why people actually abandon the hobby, especially with their first tank. They're all excited. They bring that tank home, they fill it up, they add some of the water conditioner, they throw the fish in that they picked up at the local fish store or at the big box store, and about a week later, all the fish are dead, or maybe 1 or 2 of the 5 or 6 are still struggling, but and they just go, forget it. Fish keeping isn't for me. So I agree. I think the tank not being ready for fish is number one. So do you have some ideas about this? If you do, share them below. I'd like to hear them. Share them in the comments. We all learn from each other around here. Okay? And that's it for me. I hope to see you on Saturday at Cichlids and Coffee, where we'll talk about this topic and many, many more with a great group of fish keepers. All right? See you later. Bye-bye.